The United States has shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon that has been floating over the country. 260 square kilometres of airspace was closed and flights suspended at 3 airports on the East Coast before the balloon was brought down near the Carolina coast. Well, joining me now live is Peter Jennings, formerly the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Peter, really appreciate your time this Sunday. What do you make of this action, essentially, by the United States military to shoot down this balloon? I guess, do they have any other option?
They had an option to do nothing, and the fact that the United States has chosen to take this course of action tells me a couple of things, Simon. One, they must have genuine concerns that the balloon was collecting intelligence information. Two, they think it's worth the public fuss in order to make a point to China that this is simply unacceptable behaviour. Bear in mind, this is in the context of the US Secretary of State postponing a trip or delaying a trip to Beijing. So I think Biden is clearly very annoyed at this action. And really, it just goes to show, China never misses an opportunity. It's looking at new technology and looking at ways to illegally gather information, otherwise known as spying. And I think on this occasion, they've been caught out and the US has done the right thing to shoot the balloon down.
What sort of information can a balloon such as this one, what sort of intelligence can it actually gather?
Well, I guess we've all got to modernise our thinking a bit about balloons. I think of First World War and American Civil War, but, this is really a large vehicle. People have said about the size of 3 American school buses, so you could pack a lot of intelligence gathering information into it. And the benefit it has is that, a satellite might go over a target of interest, but it'll do it for a few seconds only every couple of hours, if that. A balloon might be able to loiter over an American missile field for, 24 hours, something of that nature. So I think what China is looking to do is to gather signals intelligence, electronic intelligence, and to do it in a very concentrated way over a number of key American missile fields in Montana. And they're interested in that, Simon, because they're building their own missile fields. They're actually expanding their missile silo system themselves in China. And so learning how the Americans do it will be a very high Chinese intelligence priority.
I guess we know, according to the reports, this balloon actually did fly over military sites. So any information that it may have obtained, obviously, whether it was transmitted to China or been gathered, at least by the American authorities after the balloon came down to the ground, we'll have to wait and see. But I guess what would China be trying to achieve by having this balloon in American airspace? Obviously, it's denied the fact that it was intentional, trying to claim a force majeure. But is it some form of coincidence that this has occurred when a high-profile trip was about to happen?
Well, I think the coincidence is to test, will America do anything about this? Washington knows that it is under 24/7 Chinese intelligence gathering in every possible way that you can think of, from human intelligence through to cyber and satellite intelligence. And I think what we have here is a new type of technology. Balloons are old technology, but the information gathering payload that would hang under the balloon, that'll be new technology. And what China is looking to do is to pick up stuff which you need to spend some time over the target in order to be able to acquire, rather than what you get from a satellite, which is a quick look as the satellite goes around in its orbit. So the audacity of it is the thing that sticks in my mind, because obviously everyone was going to see it. And so it really comes down to a political decision, which we know went direct to Joe Biden's desk, to say, well, are we going to ignore it or are we going to bring it down? What will happen now is America will look at the debris for intelligence information, and that could be quite revealing. I hope we get to see some of it in order to find out just exactly what China has and what they were attempting to find with it.
And what sort of position would Australia sort of take in this? And this is quite interesting because Richard Marles is over in the United States at the moment, speaking with defence counterparts. And there's also speculation that Anthony Albanese is tossing up a trip to China too. Would this influence that at all?
Look, I think Australia needs constantly to be reminded how serious the strategic business is in the Indo-Pacific. You know, it's tempting, and quite a few people have done this, to believe that simply because Chinese language has grown a little warmer to Australia, that there's no longer a problem in the relationship. The question I'd be asking Richard Marles is, well, do we have any evidence of these types of balloons coming over Australian territory? I'm sure China would dearly love to be able to put some sort of loitering intelligence gathering asset over Pine Gap, for example. So hopefully Marles will hear from his American counterparts just how seriously they're taking the threat. And then I think the question is, well, does Australia face similar risks? And if so, what would we do about it should the situation happen here?
And just while I've got you, Peter, what do you make? There's been reports too, our political editor Andrew Clennell is reporting that Anthony Albanese is also planning a trip to the United States to announce the next phase of the AUKUS deal. Part of that, reportedly, is this notion that Australia is looking to loan a nuclear submarine to fill the nation's capability gap until the AUKUS submarines arrive. So essentially have Navy personnel training in that nuclear submarine. What do you make of that?
Well, firstly, I'm really glad that Albanese is going, because he needs to take AUKUS seriously. You know, this is going to be the biggest announcement in the life of Albanese's government when in March we hear what nuclear-propelled submarine it is we're going to get under AUKUS. And the Prime Minister has to lead this. He can't just delegate that to Richard Marles or anybody else. Secondly, if it's a case of, you know, we may need an American submarine to fill a gap between when our existing submarines have to retire because of age, well, we need to prepare for that, and that is going to require a lot of Australian naval personnel to train on American nuclear-propelled submarines. And I suspect we're going to see American nuclear-powered submarines coming to Australian ports, particularly our West Coast naval base, HMAS Stirling. So these are big moves, and the fact that Albanese is personally investing his own time and political credibility in being part of it, I think is good, because that means to say he and his government are taking this with all the seriousness that it deserves.
Well, Peter Jennings, really appreciate your observations on all of those issues today. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Simon.